Hello everyone and welcome to episode 101 of the James Layton Fitness Podcast. So in this specific episode we'll be discussing 3 tips to help to prevent your hip shooting up too quickly with regards to the deadlift. Now in my opinion this is probably one of the biggest errors I see all the time with people's hips shooting up too quickly, and this is actually a problem that I have suffered with personally with my deadlift, and I'm going to discuss three things that I've applied to myself, my clients, which I know is going to make a dramatic difference to your deadlift. So firstly, this is probably the most common error, and if you just apply this one tip alone, this will make a huge difference. This will probably make the biggest difference of all the 3 tips I'm going to provide you. What most people typically do when they set up to the deadlift, they set up to the deadlift as if they're doing a squat, i.e. they have their hips far too low, and then when they're performing the deadlift, their hips shoot up first before the bar actually moves off the floor. So my tip to you would be to set up to the deadlift as you normally would do, and then you're going to set a camera to the side of your deadlift to record this, and then you're going to pay close attention because you're going to notice the hip shoot up first and then the bar leaves off the floor. And what I want you to particularly pay close attention to is where your hips are as the bar actually moves off the floor. So obviously the hips are going to shoot up initially, but when the bar actually moves off the floor, where is the hip position? Because that hip position is now going to be your starting position. So every time you set up to the deadlift, I want you to set your hips as they would have been as the bar left the floor with your previous deadlift setup, and that alone will make a huge difference because I see far too often people just squatting the weight as opposed to starting their hips high and actually performing the deadlift as it should be performed. Now the second big tip is more of a mental cue. What most people typically do when they perform the deadlift, all they're thinking about is just pulling the weight off the floor. Now what I want you to focus on is the complete opposite. I want you to focus on actually driving your midfoot through the floor. I want you to actually focus on pushing the other way. Instead of pulling off the floor, you're going to be pushing your feet through the floor, and this will help to prevent the hip shooting up, but also keep the back in much more neutral spine, and you'll be in a much more braced position, focusing on driving the feet through the floor as opposed to thinking that you're pulling the weight off the floor. Now the next tip is all to do with bracing your core effectively. You've probably heard this mentioned many times before, but I find that very few people actually know how to do this correctly. So when I say brace your core, I basically mean having a big deep breath before each and every deadlift repetition, and you're actually going to focus on a big deep breath, and then you're pushing your abdominals out. So the best way I know to describe this is if someone were to punch you in the stomach, if you knew they were going to punch you in the stomach, what would you do? You'd focus on bracing that core and pushing your stomach out. You'd hold that position, and that's the exact position I want you to think about as you're pulling the weight off the floor. So big deep breath, push those abdominals out. If you're wearing a belt, I want you to focus on pushing your abs up against the belt. You're then going to hold that brace position for the whole repetition. You can then breathe out at the top of the rep, lower the weight to the floor, and then repeat. So once that weight has been lowered to the floor, you're then going to have a big deep breath again, push that stomach out, push it up against the belt if you're wearing a belt, and that will really make a huge difference because it basically means you'll be in a much tighter position. Remember, if you're not in a tight brace position, you're going to be losing power. Same with the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift in particular. So make sure you're braced and apply those 3 tips, and they'll make a significant difference to prevent your hip shooting up too quickly within the deadlift. So hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you can start applying these immediately and start seeing results. If you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton Layton fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page and you can download that immediately. I'll look forward to speaking to you next week.